Hey everyone, Jared here again, and since the Dogman movie has just come out recently, I thought I'd like to do this video talking about the book series that Dogman originated from, and that is the Captain Underpants series. Yes, now, this is a series that I grew up with. I never read any of the Dogman books because I was a bit older when they came out. Although I was a teenager when the last few Captain Underpants books came out, and I still read all of those because Captain Underpants was a big part of my childhood. But yeah, the way that Dogman fits into Captain Underpants is it's a character that in universe was created by George and Harold, the kids in this who create Captain Underpants basically. In this first book, it is mentioned that they created Captain Underpants. No, they created Dogman, and that was like their first comic book character they created. But then in this one, you actually get to see George and Harold when they first meet, and you actually get to see the original Dogman comic that they created. And then in this one, which is the final ever Captain Underpants book, you actually get to see it teases it at the end that they're going to do a Dogman full book, but it is also teased. It is teased like in the last page of it that next they're going to do a Dogman comic. So yeah, that's how Dogman ties into it. And basically, I'll explain the basic premise of Captain Underpants as well. So yeah, those kids, George and Harold, which I just talked about, they write comic books and stuff, and they created a character called Captain Underpants, and basically they hypnotize their principal into being Captain Underpants, Mr. Krupp, who's a really harsh principal who makes them do work for them, which that seems like a bit of a harsh punishment. And then in the end they figure out that the way to turn him back into Mr. Krupp is by pouring water on his head. But what they didn't realize at first is that now that means every time he snaps his finger, every time he hears someone snap their fingers, he turns into Captain Underpants. But yeah, when they pour water on his head again, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. And yeah, for the first two books, which these ones, which I have this collector's edition of the first book, and I do also have the original, one, the one that I had first. Then there's like the second one. Yeah, you can see this one's a bit shorter than the other books. Yeah, because I got this one for World Book Day for free. I think, this was actually the first one that I got. It was the second book. But yeah, for the first two books, he actually didn't have any superpowers. But then in the third book, he actually does get superpowers. So every time someone snaps their fingers, not only does he think he's a superhero, but he actually has superpowers. So there's that. And by the way, yes, if you notice, the author's name is Dav Pilkey. It's Dave spelt without an E. Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual spelling. Apparently the reason that he spells his name that way is because he used to work at Pizza Hut. And apparently, when they had the name badge on there, the thing that, presses the letters in, the E had broken. So it was just Dave, or Dav without an E. And he just kind of rolled with it after that, yeah. Yeah, I kind of like the fact that he just decided to spell his name that way because of the printing thing on the name badge not working. So yeah, I'd say for Captain Underpants, I'd say for the most part, the first 5 books are kind of self-contained books. You can read them, and you can just read one. I read this one first, and it does give you an introduction of how Mr. Krupp became Captain Underpants, but you can kind of read these books as standalone stories. This one does have the origin, and the third one does show how he got superpowers, but for the most part, they're kind of standalone stories. But then starting with the 6th and 7th book, it starts having an overarching story. This one you have the Bionic Booger Boy Part 1 and Part 2. So obviously, since it's Part 1 and Part 2, they continue, their Part 1 and Part 2. I guess you could say this started the whole thing of, a book, series being in 2 parts, and the others, they did it with movie adaptations of books. But you could say Captain Underpants kind of started it. Yeah, so obviously with it being part 1 and part 2, like, you know, they continue into each other, but then like the part 2 has a cliffhanger as well, so, and it continues into this one. And the thing is, like, this one ends on a big cliffhanger, and it advertises the next book that's going to come. And Dav Pilkey actually stayed on a hiatus at this point, and I do know the reason why, which I'll get into. But yeah, I remember reading this as a kid. I was so hyped for the next one, you know. This one ended on a cliffhanger and it teased the next book. The thing is, like, this one came out in 2006, and the next book didn't come out until 2012, so we had to wait like 6 years for the cliffhanger to be continued. Although, I mean, I started reading these books during the time that Dav Pilkey was on his hiatus. I mean, I started reading them when I was maybe like 7 going on 8, which would have been like around 2008. Well, I would have turned 8 in 2008, so yeah, like that time like was when Dav Pilkey was on his hiatus. And the reason he was on his hiatus, and I didn't know this as a kid, you know, as a kid it was like, you know, why is it taking so long for the next book to come out? But I do know the reason why now. It was because his father had cancer, and he was taking a hiatus from writing books to, you know, take care of his father. And his father actually passed away in 2008. So I think he stayed on the hiatus a bit longer then because he was mourning over his father's death. You know, and as I said, like 2008 was the year that I think I got into these books. So I did read all of them before the 9th book came out. Another thing is, after he did the 7th book, he did do these 2 like activity books, which were pretty fun as well. But yeah, apparently the reason that he did these 2 activity books instead of doing another novel was because this was right after he did the 2 Bionic Booger Boy books, and apparently, like, he said that he needed a break from writing a novel after writing these, because these had a much like bigger story. You know, as I said, like this one was when the book started to have, you know, an overarching story. So he kind of needed a break from writing that, so he did these 2 activity books instead. Yeah, and as I said, like then he did this one, and then his father had cancer, so he took a hiatus. They do have like these comics in them, which are like Harry Potty. Which is a comic created by like George and Harold, and you know they're exclusive to these books, so you get them for that. It's much like Dogman, which I mentioned, which is a comic created by them in universe, and also they have done other spin-off books like Super Diaper Baby. They did 2 of these. Like I've only got the second one with me. I had the first one as a kid, but I remember preferring the second one actually. And they did do the Ukengluck one, which that actually got banned in 2021 because apparently it was racist. But I mean, yeah, at least Dav Pilkey actually gave his consent for them to remove it. One aspect of the books that I always loved was how they always had these segments, but it was a whole chapter full of just the comics that George and Harold had created, like this, you know. And like I loved how a lot of the comics themselves were just really entertaining, and you know it's no surprise that he's done spin-offs like Super Diaper Baby and Dogman, and you know like the Harry Potty and those activity books that I mentioned. And what I also loved is like how this is a world where a lot of the stuff in their comics actually comes true. Like, you know, they turn Mr. Krupp into Captain Underpants. Like their comics kind of end up turning their teachers into super villains, like, you know, Professor Poopy Pants and the Wedgie Woman, and also in the final book, So It Stinks a Lot, where, you know, it's the gym teacher who becomes the villain. And now I'd like to talk about maybe one of the most iconic villains, and you could say he's like the main villain of Captain Underpants, which is Professor Poopy Pants / Tippy Tinkle Trousers, as he changed his name. You know, he was the main villain of this book, and then in this one, it's teased that he'll come back, you know, at the end of this one. Then you had this one, which, like, a lot of it actually isn't about him. A lot of it is just explaining the ending of the previous book. But yeah, Terrifying Return of Tippy Tinkle Trousers, that's what he changed his name to. And then the next one, The Revolting Revenge of the Radioactive Robo-Boxers, which, yeah, this is more him as the main villain. I mean, I think this is maybe more what people were expecting this one to be. And I think maybe that's originally what this was going to be, because like, you know, this one, they go back to the time of like the dinosaurs and like the prehistoric era. And like this one, when they advertised the next book, they show dinosaurs in it, so that's probably like what it was originally going to be. But I love the whole thing, his whole backstory in this. So basically, he's from a country called New Switzerland, which is a country where everyone has a silly name. Of course, when he goes to America to, you know, teach at Jerome Horwitz Elementary, which is the school in Captain Underpants, everyone laughs at his name. And that kind of drives him crazy, so he becomes this villain, and also he tries to force everyone to have a silly name as well. I think one of the most fun aspects of this book is the whole name-changing system, which I think this was definitely something that was meant to be for the reader to join in on. So he has this system where it has words next to the letters in the alphabet. So this first chart is like the letter of your first name, and the word that's next to it, that's going to be your new first name. Then here, his letters, you know, the first letter of your surname, and the whatever, you know, your surname starts with, the word next to it is going to be the first half of your new surname. Then this column, or this chart, this is the last letter of your last name, and the word next to it's going to be the new second half of your surname. So yeah, and my name using that system was Poopsie Lizard Fanny, which is funny. I mean, obviously the book's American, but the thing is, in Britain, Fanny has a different meaning. So, I mean, my parents always kind of told me not to say that because, yeah, because of what Fanny means in this country. But, you know, you might think maybe they might change it for a UK audience. I mean, they did change it. You know, you can see there, S is Fanny. So my name was Poopsie Lizard Fanny. The thing is, they did change something in this book for a UK audience, which I think they didn't need to. They changed, there's a character called Dr. Diaper. They changed his name to Dr. Nappy in the UK version. I mean, I know why. I mean, we call diapers nappies, but I mean, I think Dr. Diaper just sounds better. I mean, it's a lot like Professor Poopy Pants, right? It works better because of the alliteration. But yeah, I mean, the thing they should have done for the UK releases, they should have kept Dr. Diaper and maybe change Fanny in the Poopy Pants book. You know, that's just my opinion. Also, another thing I find funny, which I forgot to mention before, is that on the name-changing chart, among the silly names, two of them are Oprah and Jar Jar, which, yeah, I find that pretty funny. And yeah, I think that's another one that's kind of a joke that's aimed more at the adults, you know, reading. Yeah, and at the end he turns his name and he changes his name into Tippy Tinkle Trousers, which he thinks is a much less silly name, but he still gets laughed at because of that. And speaking of funny names, like a lot of the teachers in these books had funny names anyway. So there was Miss Anthrope. There was Ms. Ribble, who becomes the wedgie woman. You know, Ms. Ribble. There's a teacher called Misdemeanor, you know, like Misdemeanor. He becomes Sir Stinks-a-Lot in the final book. There's a teacher called Mystified, you know, like Mystified. But not only that, but his first name is Morty, so his name is Mortified. So yeah, I really like the play on words there. And I think, honestly, that's something that I came to appreciate more when I got older, because I think when I first read them at around like 7 going on 8, like I didn't know what a lot of those words meant. I think even my dad like actually told me what those words meant. And I mean, my dad actually really enjoyed reading these books as well with me. Yeah, we read these books together a lot. I think he actually really enjoyed them as well. So yeah, it does have a lot of humour in them that I think adults can enjoy as well. I mean, I've started actually rereading them recently because of the Dogman movie coming out. You know, that kind of had me having Captain Underpants in my mind. So yeah, I mean, I might check out the Dogman movie sometime, but you know, Dogman I didn't so much grow up with. You know, I grew up with Captain Underpants more. I haven't read any of the Dogman spin-off books, you know, Another one of the most fun aspects about these books was the whole flipperama thing, where you basically created, a moving image by flipping the pages like that. Yeah, that was good as a good like interactive feature of these books. And yeah, I will be honest, like the first few books that I had, I did accidentally rip the pages on the flipperamas, but I have grown to love them. I said I do have the collector's edition of the first book. I think the first edition that I have, I think this one, the flipperamas are ripped, and this one, the first one that I ever got, the flipperamas in this are ripped as well. So yeah, I mean, I know they did these editions for the first 3 books. I would like to get them because of the hard cover like this, but also it does have a CD in them. So yeah, this is where the CD was, but I've taken it out and I've put it in this CD wallet. So yeah. They had songs on them which you could listen to the songs on Dav Pilkey's website, and he also had a lot of music videos on his website which were cool. I used to like watching and listening to those on his site. I believe they're no longer on his website, but you can still listen to the songs on CD, and a lot of the music videos are still on YouTube, so you can watch them on there. So yeah, like I think a lot of the music videos, at first they were sung by, at first they were like animated music videos, which I did like those a lot. I think the ones that had animated music videos, they were mostly sung by a guy named Josh Katz. I don't really know much about him other than, I've seen his name, and it's saying that he sang these Captain Underpants songs, but then they started doing some live action music videos. It was a guy named Koji Matsumoto who was in them, and a lot of the time he dressed up as Captain Underpants. And yeah, they did also do a video that's like about the origins of those music videos, and you can find that on YouTube now. But basically Koji worked at a sushi restaurant that was local to Dav Pilkey, and him and Dave became good friends. And apparently Koji would often sing songs, to his customers, like if it was their birthday or something, he would sing like a funny birthday song or something. And basically Dave asked him, would you like to make some songs for my website? And he said yeah, and he started creating great songs and great music videos because of that. I mean, he's no longer doing Captain Underpants songs, but I believe like later on when Dav Pilkey came back from his hiatus, like he did some videos where he was talking about his books and there's music playing, and I think like it does credit like saying music by Koji Matsumoto. So I mean, it's cool that he continued making music after that. And yeah, I think he's also done some other music that's completely unrelated to Dav Pilkey or Captain Underpants, which I haven't really listened to, but yeah, I know that he has done some stuff like that. And yeah, one thing I should mention is all the Captain Underpants books that I own are all in black and white, but I know the more recent editions, like he's actually coloured them in, which I believe it's because, I mean, I think all the Dogman books, they're only available in colour. So I think he decided to colour in all the Captain Underpants books and stuff, and maybe, that's more what kids today would prefer, but I mean, as a kid, I always kind of liked the fact that they were black and white. I like the fact that the covers were in colour, but the actual pictures inside were black and white. But yeah, but I mean, I loved, Laurel and Hardy when I was a kid, so I mean, yeah, I guess I was that sort of kid who just liked black and white stuff. But yeah, the black and white versions are kind of what I prefer, so yeah. But I would like to get the other like collector's editions of these, but I don't know if I'd be so keen to get like the colour versions. I just get like these ones that have the CDs on them, for the second and third books. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. I mentioned before the teachers had funny names. I forgot to mention the cafeteria ladies actually had funny names as well. Not the aliens who become the new cafeteria ladies, although they have funny names as well. The original dinner ladies or cafeteria ladies, one of them's called Miss Creant and another one is called Mrs. DePoint. So yeah, it's funny, there's 3 of them, but I think only 2 of them you get their names, Miss Creant and Mrs. DePoint. But yeah, but the aliens who become the new dinner ladies, their names are Zorks, Clax and Jennifer. So yeah, I'd also like to talk a bit about this book, because this was always a favourite of mine in the series, and it was the last one of kind of the original era of Captain Underpants, before Dave Pilkey went on his hiatus. But I really like this one because of like the time travel and like the alternate universe. So in this one, you do have an alternate universe where like the good guys are bad and the bad guys are good. So in this alternate universe, George and Harold are evil, and Mr. Krupp is nice, but then they turn him into Captain Blunderpants, who's an evil version of Captain Underpants. And yeah, I just always found the name Captain Blunderpants to be hilarious. And yeah, if you can see, like, he has hair, like, he puts his toupee on when he becomes Captain Blunderpants, which Mr. Krupp, he actually has a toupee when he's Mr. Krupp, but takes it off when he becomes Captain Underpants. Captain Blunderpants is the other way around. The nice Mr. Krupp actually doesn't wear a toupee, but he puts it on when he becomes Captain Blunderpants. I'd also like to talk about the last page of this book where it advertises upcoming stuff, because I did put up a community post talking about some of his books that were announced but never actually came out. So yeah, so this one, of course, like I showed, that came out, but a while later. It came out after his hiatus. It advertises Super Diaper Baby 2, which did come out, but that didn't come out until 2011. Which this one came out in 2012. So they came out, but it was a long wait for them to come out. And then the other two, there's like Captain Underpants, like How to Draw Heroes and Villains. That one never came out. And there's also Frankenfart versus the Bionic Bunnies from Diarrhea Land, which, if you can see, it actually says it's by evil Dave Pilkey. Yeah, because this was actually a book in universe when they go to the alternate universe where the good guys are bad and the bad guys are good. And also in this alternate universe, Melvin is actually really dumb, and instead of like, usually he's quite intelligent, but in the alternate universes he's dumb, and he's reading this book and he can't understand it, even though it's like apparently a really easy book to understand. So yeah, those ones were never made. Apparently, like, I guess the reason this one wasn't made was because Scholastic were not keen on the whole idea. It has 3 of the words in the title. It has fart, barf, and diarrhea. So I guess they weren't keen on that, even though, they've done Super Diaper Baby. They've had villains who were poo and pee. And then, yeah, I should mention, like in Super Diaper Baby, the first book, the villain was turned into poo. This one, the villain is turned into pee. And like, of course, they had in Captain Underpants, they had villains who, the Bionic Booger Boy, so literal, snot. But apparently the whole idea of the Frankenfart thing was too much. And the reason that we kind of know that Scholastic rejected the book is because apparently in like Cat Kids Comic Club, which is a spin-off of Dogman, which I haven't read, but I found out that Frankenfart actually is referenced in that. It's actually a comic that one of the characters writes that gets rejected, which is possibly a reference to the fact that Scholastic rejected the book in real life. But yeah, at least with Frankenfart, like, there is a bit of an explanation as to why it never came out. Whereas, this one, like How to Draw Heroes and Villains, that we really don't have an explanation as to why it never came out. Actually, after having a closer look at this, I think it's pretty clear that this was a joke, because it says, learn to draw 78 billion cartoon characters in 22.5 ridiculously easy lessons. Like, something tells me that that's not real. Like, even if this book actually did come out, I don't think it would teach you to draw that many characters. And I don't think it would only be in 22.5 ridiculously easy lessons, I'm just saying. I mean, you could say maybe, when Dave Pilkey came back from his hiatus, maybe he changed his mind and decided not to publish these. But some people have speculated, like, maybe these are pranks that, he never actually planned on, publishing these books. He's a prankster, much like, George and Harold. And you know, there was one that he announced even when he came back from his hiatus. He was going to do one called Farts, which apparently is going to be a book, and it was going to have a DVD included, and it was going to have like a home movie that he made with his friends and family. It's about a superhero team called Farts, and apparently Dave was going to play a gorilla in that. I've heard some people say like maybe in the end he decided to keep that private and just had it for his friends and family, but some people think it was just a complete joke altogether, because I mean maybe Scholastic wouldn't publish a book that has farts in the title. I mean, they rejected Frankenfart, so there's that. But also, like, you know, he did do the Ook and Glock book when he came back, which, you know, that's been banned now. But at the end of that, it advertises a sequel, which that never came out. And yet, like, the book's been banned now, so I think now the Ook and Glock sequel has a 0% chance of coming up. Although, like, the book was banned, like, a while after, like over 10 years after the book first came out. So, I mean, he could have released a sequel in that 10 years, you know, before it got banned. I've read some people online thinking again that maybe that was another joke, that he never actually, you know, planned on releasing that. Although I did see an interview where he was asked about it, and he said that he has written one, but he hasn't like drawn the illustrations yet and hasn't got it published yet. Because he's been working so much on Dogman.
I have actually written a second Ook and Glock book. Ook and Glock is, of course, the Kung Fu Caveman from the Future series, and it's another spin-off of Captain Underpants. I'm drawing Lily now. She's the baby dinosaur from that series. I do have another story. I wrote it a couple of years ago in a cave, actually. I have a cave in Japan that I kayak to. And so I wrote the book, and I think the only reason it hasn't come out yet is because I've been so busy with Dogman that I haven't had a chance to do the illustrations yet. But yes, I do plan to continue the series.
That's great.
And that's why. But he said he plans to continue it, but that was from a while ago, and it was before the first book got banned. So yeah, I think these days there's pretty much no chance of Ook and Glock getting a sequel unless, you know, they decide to bring back the first book. Okay, now I'd like to talk about sort of the second era of Captain Underpants. And what I mean by that is the books that came out when Dav Pilkey came back from his sort of hiatus. So first, like, you know, as I mentioned, he continued the whole storyline with Tippy Tinkle Trousers, you know, formerly known as Professor Poopy Pants. Then he did the Tyrannical Retaliation of the Turbo Toilet 2000, which was sort of the main toilet out of the Talking Toilets book, which was the second ever book, which this one kind of ends, it's kind of open to like maybe the turbo toilet could return sometime in the future. So it was kind of cool that they finally, you know, continued that kind of cliffhanger. But, you know, even though it was cool that these, you know, brought back villains from the first era, like, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, I wish they would, like, create a new super villain. So then they kind of did that with the final book. I mean, it is Mr. Meaner who becomes the villain, Sir Stinks-a-Lot, you know, which he was a character. Mr. Meaner was a character in the previous books, but he wasn't the super villain before. It's kind of like how Ms. Ribble was a character already in Captain Underpants, but she didn't become a super villain until this book, when she became the Wicked Wedgie Woman. And also how Melvin was a character in the previous books, but he didn't become a supervillain until this one, where he becomes the Bionic Booger Boy. So it was cool that, you know, for the final book, they finally had sort of a new supervillain, even though the character who becomes the villain had already existed. But the supervillain was new to this book, so I'm glad they did that, you know, just for the final book, but, you know, for one last time before Dav Pilkey retired the series. And of course, after the book series ended, they did do the Captain Underpants movie, and there's also a Netflix series now, which I enjoy those as well. I think they're a good, fun adaptation of the books, but I still think the books are my favourite part of the Captain Underpants franchise. I mean, you could say that's nostalgia, but I mean, I think they are genuinely the funniest and, you know, most fun thing in the Captain Underpants franchise, but yeah, I still really enjoy the movie and the Netflix show. I feel like the reason they did the Netflix show instead of a sequel is because the first one actually didn't do that well, unfortunately, but I think it has gained a bit of a cult following among the Dave Pilkey fan base, and and I think that fan base kind of led to the Netflix show, and it has enough of a fan base now. Of course, now there's the Dogman movie, which has actually been doing very well, which is nice considering the Captain Underpants movie I think kind of didn't do that well. I know the Dogman movie is directed by a man named Peter Hastings, which he actually also worked on the Captain Underpants Netflix show. So he clearly loves the source material, and I've heard the Dogman movie has been pretty well received by a lot of Dave Pilkey fans. So I mean, I'll probably check it out someday. But yeah, as I said, I have more nostalgia towards Captain Underpants than Dogman. One last thing I'll say. Dave Pilkey actually got the names for some of the things from classic comedy that I'm a fan of. So the school in Captain Underpants is called Jerome Horwitz Elementary, and Jerome Horwitz is actually the real name of Curly Howard from the Three Stooges, and I love the Three Stooges, so that's cool. And he also got the surnames for the kids from his favourite Little Rascals. I know George and Harold, their names are George Beard and Harold Hutchins. He got those surnames from his two favourite Little Rascals, Stymie, whose real name was Matthew Beard, and also Weezer, who his real name was Bobby Hutchins, and also Super Diaper Baby. His name in the book is Billy Hoskins, and he actually got the name Hoskins from Farina from the Little Rascals, who his real name was Alan Hoskins. So yeah, that's cool because I love Little Rascals, so it's cool that he took the names from that. And yeah, I love the Three Stooges as well, so it's cool that he named the school after Curly from that. So yeah, overall I absolutely love Captain Underpants. I have great nostalgia for it, and I grew up with some of Dave Pilkey's other books as well. Actually, I grew up with the Dumb Bunnies and Ricky Ricotta's Mighty Robot, but Captain Underpants was always my favorite. And I still think they're really good books to this day. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. You could tell me, if you grew up with these books as well. You could tell me, what are some childhood memories towards those books, and maybe what's your favorite book in the series. I'd love to hear that. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching this video today, and take care, guys. Bye.